Hi, my name is Benedict. The purpose of today's video is looking at Odin 2. There's been an Odin 1 out there for a while, but now it's just moved to an Odin 2 and it's a beta. So there are some imperfections, some of which I will find and or show you here. So if we have an unexpected crash, just the way it goes. Now, for those of you who know me, I normally work in Reason. At the moment, I'm working with Reaper because Odin 2 is a VST3 only, and VST3s don't run yet in Reason. So I'm having to use Reaper, which I'm not super familiar with. I can use it, there's no dramas, it's just not my comfort environment. Plus, I'm hearing myself come back in my cans, which is just plain disconcerting because there's quite a latency. Nothing to do with Reaper, simply because to do the screencasting, I have to turn off ASIO, which sucks. Okay, Odin 2. Straight out of the box, this is how it loads. Player note. One of the first things I noticed is, look, you can see it clip. Now, this is not uncommon. It hasn't clipped the masters because I've got ways to control it. Dynamics, playing pretty heavy-handed as a limiter. Like many VST, they don't really adhere to any standards. So you've got really high-level outputs. The advantage is that if you don't really know what you're doing when you first launch something, it's really loud. The downside is you launch something in the middle of a mix and it's just far too loud. So it overawes everything you've got, blows your mix. So if the Odin people are listening, I'm going to say, look, Wave Wardens, be some Warden and actually control your main outputs, because they're just too hot. So if we pull that back, I can play 4 notes at once and I'm not blowing my levels. So that makes it far more usable. Now what we've got is awfully like Reason Studios' Thor. So as part of what made me notice this when I saw it in my Facebook feeds today, it's like OMG Thor. Only it's obviously not Thor, but it's obviously Thor, if you follow my drift. We've got a semi-modular architecture, just like Thor. I'm going to have to stop saying just like Thor. We've got several different oscillator types. We've got an analog oscillator with a built-in drift. On its own, you don't hear it, but it can get pretty drifty. We can set the phase of the oscillator or to be locked to key on. So Juno 106 or SH 101 kind of territory. For basses, it will give you a tighter attack, but you lose warmth. It starts to sound a bit digital. But it's good to have the option. You've got the usual suspects for shape. Now, the pulse width doesn't actually go down to 0% thin, so the sound doesn't disappear. It goes thin, but not all the way. Pulse width only applies to the square. So it's not like a Predator or something where every wave is warpable. Double clicking allows you to enter values. Control clicking resets to a default position. Usual ±3. I'd rather ±4, but you do have semitone. That only moves to 7. So again, a little odd. There are a few things, actually I said again, but look, I've been thinking about this through the morning as I've been playing with it and crashing it. The wonderful thing with Reason and all its devices is that they're incredibly well thought through. So they become quite universal in their usability because everything is so thought out. They've thought what's going to happen here, what's going to happen there. They do end up rolling off some of the quirks or characters that you might get in a synth, but they make the devices almost infinitely usable. Some of the quirks and characters can make a device less usable. Some of the same level of thought doesn't appear to have gone into Odin. Plus minus half semitone and overall volume. Odd. Look again, minus 20 dB. Minus 20 dB is an odd thing to choose because it's not within the 61224, and nor does it go to low as about minus 48, which is what most people sort of perceive as off. But if I want to turn this oscillator, change its volume through some sort of automation or enveloping thing, there is no off. So in practice, how are we going to go? But I think at times it might annoy me. So we've got different oscillators. A wavetable oscillator, so we can pick these styles. Let's say glass. And scan through what's there. Now, unless I'm missing something, there doesn't seem to be a way to bring in my own samples. So by wavetable, it's more PPG, as in it's a locked system. We can then choose what we do with, or how we modulate that. Now let's put a little bit of chorus, just because listening to things with any effects can get a bit harsh. Not going to overdo it. And, whoop, no, we don't want that. Now, the thing you may notice is this structure is also not the same as Thor, but it's the same as it works in Europa and Grain. So I think these people are looking at Reason and looking to duplicate Reason into the VST world, which is always kind of an irony. Delay. Again, odd default settings. 1 second is a really odd default time. Let's pull that back to about 350. Something I can't get ping pong to ping pong. Sounds the same to me either way. So whether that's a bug, I don't know. Let's just have a little bit of both of those, just so we're not listening to dry sound. Again, we've got to watch our levels. So quite a pleasing sort of digital type sound. Very PPG. These could actually be the PPG waves for all I know. But they can be fun once you pile a couple of these things up against each other. So let's take that and that. Use the same alpha. Actually, no. Oh, no, we use the same alpha. Like Thor, you can assign what goes to which filter, and filter 1 can go to filter 2. In case you're wondering what I was doing. So you can get into that sort of evolving digital, early digital sound quite easily. There's a multi-oscillator. That gives us wavetables. Again, it accesses the wavetables, which gives me a sneaky feeling that maybe the analog oscillator isn't actually an analog oscillator rather than a wavetable. Don't really care. All I care about is what it sounds like. So very much the wavetable oscillator with a detune attached. My problem with that is that it's definitely not a super saw type sound. It sounds kind of pinched. Like, to me, what it's doing is duplicating the raw oscillator wave and then adding its pitch offsets or whatever, and it's not giving you that really massive lots of oscillators running at once. It's a divide, duplicate kind of thing. But it's there, no bitching. This is something that Thor doesn't have, which is a vector oscillator. So you can choose various types of waveforms, some of which you may be able to create yourself. We'll have to have a look at those. But we can create different types of sounds. So let's just pick some random ones. No idea what we're going to end up here. We won't go with those because we may end up with nothing useful anyway. Is anyone thinking Prophet VS or the like? That covers that territory. The idea behind vector is very interesting. Personally, it's never fully floated my boat, but it's there and that's cool. A chiptune oscillator. So it's got some core chip forms and noise, and then it's got the arpeggiator things built in. I'm not going to pretend how that works, but odd oscillator I have, but cool in its own way. Now, Thor is a little bit of a dark horse when it comes to FM. It can't do the DX7 thing literally, but if you know what you're doing and you can plan ahead, which FM's about planning ahead anyway, then you can get a surprising amount out of it. So I was intrigued to see how this was emulated. One carrier, one modulator. So there you go. We can hear a little bit of lumpiness as we're moving our wheel. Something that's interesting, I don't love, but you can do, is you can change different wave shapes. So let's say strings against so there's a lot of initial potential there for ugliness. And I know ugliness is super popular, so it's good to show it. It's a fairly smooth FM. And two different types of FM. There's what I might call an honest FM, which is quite literally what happens if you take one analog oscillator, plug it into the patch input of the pitch of your next oscillator, and turn it up. You end up with this weird pitch thing, or the more DX style, which is what becomes far more useful. But it's kind of cool. They're given the option. You've got the option within Thor, just through which source you use, but here it's on the front panel. So it's more for sound effects, weird, spooky graveyards, that sort of stuff. But it's cool that it's there. There is, however, a limit. If we choose another FM oscillator, go into our mod, we choose OS2, we'll turn off OS2 there, and OS1 as our destination. We'll choose linear, we'll have no FM, no FM. See, I'm changing my carrier here. Notes are not consistent, maybe just because I don't have reset on. No, not that. Something's inconsistent. What that is, why that is, not sure. Doesn't 100% bother me. It's kind of cool a lot of times in a synth to have differences. The one concern is with FM and similar very digital formats is that you often want that exact. And if this is going to play me slightly different, then sometimes that may be annoying because you're not going to get that same exact clank on your bass every time. Whether that's a bug or what, I don't know, but it's just a thing I'm noting. But what I'm pointing out here is that the carrier should be changing the FM result that I'm hearing here, and it's not. Changing my octave here does, but it's still a very soft FM. It's like they're afraid to go like FM really does. Upside is that you don't have sounds that immediately go to ugly, so it gives you a bit more flexibility. But okay, that I'm not expecting. I have no idea what's going on here. So obviously, at the moment at least, there is something that stops you from taking one oscillator to modulate another and get well-behaved DX7 type sounds. So for the moment, I'm going to put that down to a bug because it feels like it should work, but it's not. So either they can explain, say, hey, this is happening because, or I feel like it's a bug. Weird. But the way it handles sounds is interesting, so I'm not going to say it's terrible. PM, phase modulation, I assume, and now normally phase modulation means Casio CZ style oscillator. A very specific sort of style, a very specific sort of sound, despite the fact that it's essentially the same as Yamaha's FM. So we've got still a carrier and a modulator. Now you'll notice that when we change an oscillator form, it largely keeps the settings that it had before. Could be good, could be bad. It's one of those things that if there was the option in the setup screen, we could say, look, next time I change an oscillator form, I want it to reset itself. Or next time I change an oscillator form, I want it to carry any applicable settings. Neither is right nor wrong. An option would be kind of cool. Getting a little lumpy. I think within modulation it doesn't lump, but we're seeing it there. Let's just try that. LFO 2 1 PM mat. No, it doesn't. So it's just a knob artifacting. So that equally suggests it probably won't happen with DAW automation, but might be worth checking at some stage there. Oh, here's a kooky one. as soon as I go to... Oh, let me turn this back up. So we're obviously deep in modulation territory. Let's say I want to switch that to something else. You see what happened? As soon as I click this, it undestinationed the existing destination, if you follow what I mean. Whereas normally a synth, like Thor, or any other I've ever used, would actually leave the destination valid until I said, oh, I want to modify that instead. So it's maybe a bug, again, one of those not super well thought through things. But PM here honestly doesn't sound like a CZ. Now you might go, well, why do you care? Well, I care because I had and loved CZs, and there is nothing like a CZ. So obviously if the option to have something that says, hey, I'm going to give you CZ sound, I'm going to care. It's really using more of a FM kind of thing, so it's okay. But it's not behaving in the way that a Casio CZ oscillator did. So yes, it may be a kind of pulse modulation, but I don't know, I'm not sold on that. Maybe it's my fault just because I'm expecting something different, but seeing it's such an obvious dance in the park with Thor, which has not a particularly bad CZ style oscillator, maybe I have expectations. Noise oscillator, low and high pass. Not as powerful as Thor's noise oscillator, but having low and high pass filters means I can choose how I want it to sound. So that's quite cool. A wave draw oscillator. Oh. I have to actually tick the box before it takes. Now, that's okay. It's definitely not a problem if it's 1985 or 1991, but I'm going to say that it's less than elegant in 2020. I've drawn a new wave, I'm not hearing it. I have to press take. Downside is it's going to be virtually impossible to draw waves smoothly. So it's not like a spline-based thing where we can say, this is exactly how I want it to be. However, we can do cool things. It's just gonna end up feeling like a bit more of a novelty than something where I'm really in control. Chip draw. Okay, if you're hell-bent on SID stuff, that's kind of cool, but again, doesn't give you the control of a modern spline-based envelope draw thing turn into an oscillator. A spec draw. Draw specs. Ah, that's what I thought. Strange naming. Everyone's love to hate. I actually really like additive, and I see FM as a form of additive. People bitch at me about that, but it's always about adding overtones to your wave. Nice to have, but again here, it's a little bit more in the novelty than giving me the power that I need to have a real additive experience. Because additive's about intense amounts of control, and that puts people off. Just like with FM, it's about intense amounts of control. This works. It works pretty easily and pretty quickly, but it doesn't give me a lot of control. Bearing in mind it's within what's essentially presenting as a virtual analog, it's a bonus, not bitching. Back to our analog. See how it's remembered my last settings. So let's send this through. Actually, we'll ignore that for the moment. We'll set that. So the default architecture is the sound goes to filter 1. We can turn that on there. We might as well turn on the other oscillators. That gets sent to filter 2. See, its source is filter 1, which gets sent to the amplifier. There is a master level here. Honestly, I've been grabbing this one. There's an option for distortion here. Couple of different modes. Now, this again is where I say, compared to Thor, Odin really lacks careful thought as to how each of these functions can be used across a really broad range of uses. So the downside that we've got is that when it's very simple, like this, the distortion sounds okay. But if we come back with a more complex sound, then it just sounds like it's spitting. And it's not cool distortion, it's just spitting ugly distortion. So you could see it as a bonus. If you're only looking to do TB3 type distortion on top of it, yeah, you're probably going to be happy. But if you're looking for that little bit of drive on top of a brass sound, I've not found it. So filters. Before I forget, you've only got 2 modes, or 2 ways of handling modes. There's polyphony, we can have up to 12 voices. That's it. There's no sort of in between, it's 1 or 12. You can go into a legato mode, which is just monophonic, but it only behaves one way. As in, press a note, press a second note, it moves to the second one, let go of the second note, first note doesn't start sounding again. So you can't do that cool AC kind of trick with it. I think that's a failing in a modern digital instrument. Give us lots of options. Glide. If I'm holding a key, press another one, it slides up there. To be expected. If I press a key, let go of it, press a new key, I've got no control over that. In Thor, you've got permanent portamento or automatic, based upon whether you're actually playing the notes on top of each other or not. So again, a lack of thought, because I get the feeling that the people who've designed this have a very narrow view of what a synth should do. And that's good where the synth shines, but it means that it doesn't shine outside of that. So if I were asked right now, okay, Benedict, Desert Island, Thor or Odin 2, Thor wins. Now, Odin 2 sounds really nice and is sometimes sounds nicer than Thor, but only sometimes. In one area, it sounds great. In every other area, it's not quite as good as Thor, or it just plain lets you down. So I'll let you decide as to how you go with that. But if we were going to say, is Odin 2 Thor? No. It's like a kind of a Thor light. But they don't sound the same anyway, so They've just copied their architecture style, and a lot more than that. It's a shame, because they could have probably done better with some original thinking and thought things through. Turn that off. Don't self-oscillate. The oscillators don't self-oscillate. There isn't a saturation. Now that behaves more like what I was hoping here. There's a gain. Again, plus minus 12 dB. Hard to know what that's about. I don't know whether that's pre or post. I think it's post. In which case, it's kind of like we probably could have been more elegant with that, guys. We don't have an independent mixer. I think this could benefit from an independent mixer. Where you can physically put it, I don't know, but there's a lot of wasted space here. I would rather see us get rid of this, because you can get distortion things like Joa Chip's Mars distortion, which is really cool, and it costs nothing. Or at least it costs nothing when I pick it up. Oh, whilst we're on this, there's a width thing. Oh, if you're wondering, there is a tooltip thing. Widens the stereo field by delaying one channel slightly. Haas, honestly, yes, Haas is a thing, but we rarely use it in the real world. Sorry guys, I'd rather you take that one away. I know I've used Haas on some of my older instruments, but that's going back forever. Today, Haas is probably not a great way of doing width. There are better ways of handling that than this. Or put it as a tiny knob over here or something. It doesn't meet modern expectations. Is it bad? Not really. But is it a great plan? No. No, not really at all. So, while tempting to do, you'll very quickly hear it unbalances your stereo. So you're not really getting width, you're just getting a delay on one side. Better ways of handling that. Now let's... velocity. Most well thought through synths, and again I have to compare this to Thor, because it looks like a clone of it, is that if I add velocity, it scales within my existing level. So if I've set my filter to here, when I up the velocity, it means that it operates from here to here. So from 0 to here, if I've got full velocity. Now what this has done is said, okay, here's your base velocity. Now velocity will make it brighter. So if I had no velocity setting, and I'm saying, yep, that's my sound, I like my sound like that, but I want to add some velocity to it. Hang on, my tone's gone. Not illegal, but unusual. There is some maths to help you do the handle here, but the fact that they've gone here, oh, let's just add, to me kind of suggests not well thought through. Sorry guys if that upsets you. Envelopes, you can go positive, negative. They've got these envelopes on top of each other. I've grabbed the wrong ones a couple of times. So that's amp envelope. "10 seconds, not a huge amount of time, but I don't know whether these are shaped or linear, but there's no real choice as to how I do it. In Thor, you can use the output of the filter envelope to modify your attack or a decay to set up your own exponential type curves. It's not the most elegant way, but at the time that was pretty impressive. And even so, it still gives you a fair amount of control. In Europa, you've got those spline-based windows, and you can just drag the curve and go woo, which honestly, it doesn't look as analogy, but it's super easy to use. I wonder here why these guys didn't go down that road. I think there's some ways to space, and it might be better to devote all the envelopes to one box that you've got here, or even all the LFOs and the envelopes, like tabs along the top or something or other. I feel like we're kind of wasting space, and sometimes I struggle to find the thing I want. I can be grabbing the wrong thing, which means I can mess up a setting. And sometimes these settings are very precise. Like there's a hotspot right there, but move a couple of pixels and you've lost it. It's an uneven instrument in that way, which represents what a lot of analog gear was prone to doing, but it can make it uneven. Now, I love analog brass sounds, plus I find that looking at how an instrument creates brassy type sounds tells me kind of everything about how it's going to create everything. I know many of you might be here going, yeah, but make them paint stripper sounds, Benedict. That's when synth's really good. I ain't going to make no paint stripper sounds. Other people will do it. I'll show you how the instrument behaves within the context of what the guys have talked about. They say we can get Model Ds, MS-20s, that sort of thing. And yes, we can. We really can. The guys have nailed that. They've nailed that better than Thor. So that's their big win. If you're looking for that exact kind of thing, Odin 2 beats Thor. Ooh, God Wars. But it limits the use of the synth overall. We'll get rid of the saturation, so we're just hearing filters. Nice. Let's give ourselves another analogia. A little bit of drift. Works fairly nicely. I think it's only tuning drift. I don't think it's timbral drift. There doesn't seem to be any kind of drift option for filters. Maybe there's oh yeah, there is a random. So we could assign random to filter. Not sure what the right amount should be at the moment, but we don't want radically different timbre for each note. But at the same time, it's nice for them to be not quite the same. So, keyboard, again, I'm gonna bitch. Yes, it makes it brighter. That's the whole plan. However, that should make this duller. Normally where you do keyboard scaling for a filter or something, you choose your central note. Commonly that's middle C, so as we increase our keyboard mod, nothing happens to the note of middle C. I'm playing middle C, and it's getting brighter. Again, we got a problem with that. There are synths that used to do it, but it's inelegant. It's better to avoid this if at all possible. One of my synths, or a couple of my synths do it, but that was because I didn't know how to avoid it. I'm assuming this is written in code, in which case they should have better math. So what this does is, again, if I say, I like this tone, but it's either a bit too bright down here, or it's getting dull up here, which it is, I might say, okay, 50% scaling. Become bright up here, but it's become brighter down there. Different schools of thought on this, but the problem is that I've lost my central tone. It's no longer there. I can't press middle C and say, oh, that's the tone I liked. That's the tone I liked. So to do this, I've got to go there. I've lost my tone. Good enough. Okay. And somehow it never comes back the same. So either make this knob set the way you think you're going to want it before you start adjusting your filter to find your sweet spot, or redo that scaling, guys. To add a different waveform. Now here's something I found before. One note. Did I notice anything? It's quieter. Why? Why should different oscillator forms have a different level? There may be some kind of reason in the laws of physics, but this isn't religion. This is practical. So if I put these two oscillators up against each other, I don't get the kind of detuning that I should be expecting. I have to fiddle with them. So again, I'm just thinking attention to detail is a little less than elegant. Maybe they're exactly the same level, but they don't show that way on the meters. Whereas in Thor, whether there's a fudge for your levels or not, I don't care. But if I choose a sawtooth and then I choose a square wave, guess what? They're the same level. That's what's important. So that when I put the two together and detune them, it does what I expect, rather than me having to mess with it. Yes, there are times where a pulse width will get quieter, but not when it's set as a square. So, sorry guys. Again, we've got that really soft sound. Which is nice. It's nice. It's not the sound I want every single time, but it's definitely a sound that works a lot of the time. Let's get rid of the chorus. I'm going to turn that key off. It annoys me. Sometimes, well, most of the time, I find this is too aggressive. Like it's sort of presaged on the assumption that if we want some kind of saturation, we want to go straight away to overdriven 303, rather than just a really, really subtle munging of something. So I will turn the volume down a bit, but I think change your curves, boys. So there's a difference between there and there. It's kind of nothing. So change your curves so that I've got, quite a lot of throw where not much happens. So I can be, really subtly controlling the great things about saturation that don't sound like distortion. And then it's like, yeah, free for all. Kill your neighbors up there. So there's a basic sort of setup. Let's give ourselves an LFO. I kind of liked the exponential. LFO right up there, a bit too much. I've tested this and sent as a bug report. It's definitely a provable one. When I went to scale this by mod wheel, it would crash Reaper. White screen, kill my audio interface, everything. Anything that was related to the audio interface, like Music B, had to be restarted. So I'm not going to do that. So I assume we can scale by mod envelope or anything like that. No reason I can see that you shouldn't, just don't want to try it. So let's move through our different filters. So the obvious low pass 24, I guess that's assuming to be model D. A 12. Oh, speaking saturation and Thor. In Thor, you've got 4 basic ways of the saturation happening within that low pass filter. There's pre-filter. In other words, it drives it, then it filters it. So you don't hear too much of the overtones. There are 2 levels of that. So based on whether you have the self-oscillation button on or off. It's a little subtle, as in you can't visually see it on the panel, but it's there and the sound is different. And then you've got your saturate after, which is more like what we hear here. And it gets into ripping turn. That's one of the things that I would miss here. I would rather be able to control whether I'm driving pre or post filter. So they've taken a lot of ideas of Thor and then dropped a lot of the subtlety, which is unfortunate. I'll turn that off. She'll turn the resonance off as well. Brasher sound, which is cool. Actually, let's drop these an octave. That's a nice sound. That's a nice sound. Starting to get a bit loud again. So, this comes back to something that I believe I saw before. Level there. It's louder. Okay, with a 12 dB low pass, we're not cutting as much highs off, so it is possible. Got a band pass. We know that's likely to get louder, so it'd be nice to chop a few dB off it anyway. Be kind to us. Quite a cool sound. It's very brash, which analogs are prone to doing. High pass. High pass again. I sort of wonder why you would build 2 different modules when they appear to be the same thing. You got plenty of real estate. Why don't you just give me a switch? So rather than having to do this, I can just go toggle, toggle, toggle. And then you've got the options, obviously, to give me toggles that go from sort of 6 dB to 96 dB. That spreads your options and spreads your powers, boys. Oberheims. That is nice. I really do like that. So we're looking at our level there. Louder. Louder makes us think it sounds nicer. Yeah, that's a well-known thing in the audio industry, as mix engineers and what have you. An instrument designer should know that. Any software designer should know that. But again, I say, like I said earlier in the piece, in the VST world, they tend not to adhere to standards, which is a good way of fooling people. So you launch a new compressor that you're trying, and it adds several dB of volume. and you go, wow. You know, it feels like you've got a hard on in your pants when all you're doing is hearing the volume turned up. If you put that fancy new compressor at exactly the same levels as your supposedly boring compressor, you find they sound the same. So this isn't just at these guys, but it's one of those things in the VST world that they don't adhere to standards. And within an instrument, it really does annoy me. From device to device, yeah, it kind of annoys me, but you know, if people aren't going to adhere to a standards, then so be it. I know it's going to happen. But within a device, there are several instances, as you see here, with oscillators and filters. As we change them in and out, our levels change. So if I were running distortion here, which is incredibly level sensitive, and I switch from my low pass to my SEM, which adds another 2 or 3 dB, I'm just going to make a mess here. I know they're going to sound different. That's the whole idea. But if their levels don't match. But this is nice. I like this filter. So in terms of them saying they want to give you that analog synth feel, winning. Diode ladders. I think people like them more for the way they overdrive than as a filter. As an ordinary filter, it's not bad, but I always find that diodes major in ordinary. But it's what happens when you overdrive them that makes them so interesting. This guy I like. It's like a cross between the SEM and the driven diode. This is, if I'm correct, the MS-20 style filter. And if you've ever played with an MS-20, I played with one of the rebuilt ones, and they are a charming little fellow. They're a little bit of gorilla in that they're not subtle, but here there's a sort of a, you know, little bully Nelson kind of a feel to it. Chorus is not helping us there. The effects are so-so. I prefer the flanger to the chorus. So it has to be one or the other then. But for the moment we'll keep it kind of pure. Effects can make a synth sound amazing, but do you really buy it for the effects unit? You turn the effects off and it sounds a bit ordinary, you kind of go, am I buying a synthesis engine or am I buying effects? Should I just go to this manufacturer's effects section and buy the effects? In this case, the effects are there, they're bonus. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. That's okay with inbuilt in a synth. Let's play with a couple other things. Just showing you this mod envelope to destination 1. We'll turn filter 2 off. That's giving us a more brass type sound, because when an instrument's blown, it tends to blow over to start with. So it's like, so you'll tend to get a pitch rise. You will also tend to get an LFOE sound, like there's a vibration. So rather than going wah, wah. So we can do that with another LFO, but we need some scaling, and I'm terrified of scaling right now. But we've got this as a pulse. So let's do this. Pulse width. Ooh. Nice. Hear how that gives us some of the wah kind of a sound? It gives us some of that vibration. It probably means that my pitch on oscillator 1's a bit... Ooh, someone's been drinking. There's a high pass version of that too. Don't love high passes. Don't love that comb filter. It has some moments, but it doesn't seem to have moments until you're pushing it hard. So it seems a bit all or nothing. So this is using the filter envelope to transition between vowels 1 and 2. So if I didn't, I just don't want to mess up my filter envelope setting at the moment. Not bad. Not the nicest vowel I've heard. And unless I'm missing something, there doesn't seem to be any way to control how intense the vowelyism is. It would be nice to be able to have another knob which we could choose which was modulated, whether we were modulating between vowel 1 and 2 or between no real action and screaming like a bitch. Again, it's one of those things, I think that, guys, yeah, you hit a mark, so now you can say it's got a formant filter, but without thinking carefully, you didn't really think how you could give us a great formant filter, or the most versatile formant filter. It's got quite a few shapes. Don't use formant filters a lot, honestly, but when I get it right with Thor, I like it. So it's definitely going to be better that it's there than it's not, but it'd be nice to have a little bit more flexibility. Ring modulator. I've just found this really ugly. I know ring modulators to some extent are a bad ugly, but it's not going low enough to give me a tremolo, and it's not giving me kind of, I don't know, it just sounds like an ugly ring modulator. Sorry, guys. Just run through these filters again. Now we've got that extra little bit of action at the beginning of the note. I prefer it off. The way those uppers are coming through is really quite nice. Band pass. Nice band passes, really are. So, in many ways, full marks on their analog style filters. They spit, they misbehave, they're nice. Go from really smooth to the models themselves I really like. In the right situation, that diode is still going to be usable. I think that about covers it. I mean, you can have a third oscillator hacking away doing its thing. We can have a second filter over here. So let's say I wanted to have this guy being a bit nasty. But I don't want that extra brightness up there. I could drive that, which means I can control it there. And a third one over here. Comb filter maybe. Just don't love that comb. I'm not getting what I want out of it, ever. I might decide to hide pass. Getting too processed. We're losing some of that. It's basically our architecture. That's it. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 envelopes. Oh, guys. Is this envelope 4 or global envelope? Naming! We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, naming. Is this number 4 or global? Just add attention to detail. Pitch bend, we can choose how pitch bendy we want to be. And mod wheel, which, as I said, when I tried to assign something, boom, all over. So, as a simple analog emulator, in many ways doing really, really well. Those models are nice. The oscillators definitely serve their purpose, but the filter models, between your frequency resonance and the saturation, even though I don't love the way it's scaled on the knob, really doing a nice job. Let down by jamming too many things into one space and doing it inelegantly. Let down by being a little bit half-assed about our modes and how things work. Things like keyboard scaling, velocity scaling, this distortion which... Notice how it doesn't start with a sort of soft burring, it just goes straight to greebly, yucky sort of sound. There's an XY thing here. Obviously, you can assign that. I've never been an XY kind of a guy, but you can assign it. That's a bonus. Some people really like XY things. Just not touching it, as I say, because it's just not a me thing. But as a clone of Thor, which we have to cover because it's so cloned of Thor, including the way things panels look and everything. Yes, you beat Thor in certain instances of analogness, but Thor beats you hands down in overall usability. Your analogs are win. Your FM is okay, but inconsistent and possibly buggy, as we saw in the Matrix. Now, I saw some problems and reported a bug already, so I think maybe your Matrix needs some care. So as to what could really be done with FM in the bigger picture, at the moment, I'm not convinced that it can equal what Thor can do with FM, so I don't believe you can do much beyond the very basics of DX style things. Getting into the next layer of what you could do with a DX style FM, I don't think it can go there. The PD just strikes me as a different flavor of FM. Doesn't come anywhere near Casio CZ, doesn't sound like it. Now maybe it's not meant to, but again, as I say, to anyone of my vintage, PM means phase modulation, which means Casio CZ, which is just such a unique sound. Vince Clarke loved it, if you're wondering. Noise oscillator, again, this is fine, but it's really basic. Could we not get into some of the things that the Thor noise oscillator does, which is creating noise off a sine wave or something like that? Because that's where noise gets really interesting. High and low pass, yep, that's okay, but it's not everything we can do with noise. Again, minus 20 dB. It's like you're saying most of the world doesn't exist. What's wrong with the other 40 dB? I want to turn that down by. So I don't have a real oscillator mixer here. If within a piece I want to automate my noise, you see it doesn't disappear. It won't disappear. I can't disappear it. Short of, but that ain't the same. So it's a little, well, more than a little inelegant in terms of usability. So we would be better off assigning some of this space that's wasted here on things that are little how's your father. If you really want to get into distortion, post amplifiers and everything, give us a filter model. You seem to be able to do distortions fairly nicely within these. So give us a U-Butte filter model that we can whack into 1 or 2 or 3. So then we can make it pre-filter. We can make it post-filter. And then we've got something really versatile, especially if you give us some interesting distortion models, which is better than having us lumbered us with it here when we could be actually having a mixer. You know, volume of this, volume of that, volume of all the various inputs. And again, the ring modulator is just nasty. I'm sorry, guys. I don't foresee a situation in which I'm going to be going, ooh, ring modulator, and I like ring modulators. Effects, again, basic. Not really going to transition the sound from here to wow. You know, you open up a Rob Papen synth, Predator, Blue, any of those sorts of things. It sounds amazing. Turn off the filter, turn off the effects, the choruses, delays, reverb, what have you, and you get a relatively ordinary sounding synth, because there's only so many things you can do with a synth. Nothing against Parpin, I think his synths are great. But a lot of the sound that you feel like you're getting in the mix is from the effects units, whereas this isn't. It's not in that ballpark at all. It's, yeah, if you see them as free, as in, oh yeah, there are a couple of things hanging around at the back, then that's okay. I'd rather you see some other things, fix some other things before we got back into the effects, simply because the world's full of lots of effects. But ultimately, it'd be nice to fix them. They're just kind of weak. So overall, I think it's a very interesting synth that has some real potential. Are they biting off more than they can chew at the moment? Yes. They can get away with that if they can sort of standardize and even out some of the oddities here. Because straight up, they've got a really nice analog-y kind of thing. You know, early 80s analog synth, pretty well nailed, very nicely. And CPU is pretty decent whilst we do it. Watch these volumes. It's like, build from your strengths. So either say, let's build a whole new synth, which seems a bit mental, so you've got this infrastructure, or say, look, let's really make the most of what we've got here for the moment, see all the other bits and pieces we've got as being extras. They're bonus material. Get what you see that I've kind of got here and make the most of it. You know, finesse it so that it's really versatile and very functional. Then you can go back and you can say, okay, how do we make FM work better? How do we transition PM from being just kind of like the FM module, only it sounds a bit different, to making me feel like when I choose that, I'm choosing it for a reason. And if it's not a CZ module, okay, but let's find a real character in that that's special and unique. And I don't know what pricing's intended to be, whether this thing's going to be free when it officially comes out, or whether there's going to be a price on it. Right now, I'm not going to say it's real high, because there's so much competition in the market with things that are better finessed. If they can finesse even just this analog model and then say, look, we've got these other bits and pieces you can play with, you know, add a little bit of spice, then I still think they've got a solid synth. If they can finesse all of those to make, like Thor, a truly polysonic synth that can turn its hand solidly, equally to analog, to FM, a bit of wavetable, then I think they're in better territory. But the thing is, Thor's old now. Thor shows its age, not in terms of sound, but it shows its age in terms of usability. What's there is very elegant, but Europa is got better filters, and Europa has much better envelope modulation structure. The downside of Europa is you can't do FM in the matrix. If you could, ooh. But they're your competition, and they're your obvious competition, because that's who you're pitching at. You're saying, hey, you wish you could have Thor. Here, we can do that for you. So long as you're not upsetting anyone's IP, and I think you're pretty borderline, then that's okay, sure. You know, I had the number of people who've set out to try to opt to de-serum serum. But they tend to create a synth that's a bit more unique than Supes and Serum. For the moment, whilst it's free, it's not as much of a winner as Surge, but then Surge started life as payware. Didn't get critical mass, but it did have some pretty solid and comfortable users. And if you pick it up now, it's elegant, it's consistent, sometimes a little odd, but once you understand how it works, it's consistent in its own way. So it's a very powerful, versatile synth that handles FM and AM, sorry, FM and analog extremely well, and can do some AME type stuff, but that wasn't my point. So you've got a little bit of a way to go, but you've got a real ace in these models here. The frequency resonance and how that sounds, that's nice. Get that right. I'd be very interested, especially if it was just that in the $39 mark, maybe. $59 perhaps. $59 if you left everything else as it is, simply because you've got this that's nice. But I'd still want to see your scalings here fixed and your level differences fixed, because you're going up against Diva, you're going up against Bit and Go-To, which is what, $50. So a lot of competition in that space. If you want to get into the competing with Thor, okay, you can be a lot cheaper, because to get Thor you've got to buy Reason. But I think you can buy the intro for Reason for $99. So that gets you, if I'm correct, if that gets you Thor, plus some cool effects. Not really anything more to say. Covered a little bit of ground. Lot that's good, lot that needs to be improved, guys. Try it yourself. It is VST3 only. They do suggest if you can only run VST2, they'll give you a version, but no support. So might not be worth getting that version until they've gotten themselves fully sorted. If you are watching this and you've gotten this far without wanting to send me a hand grenade, send me a VST2 and I'll run in Reason. Then we can really go against Thor and see how the two sound back to back. I could have done that in here, but I just didn't want to sort of overload things and make things complex. If I had this, I think I would use it when I'm looking for very analogy kinds of things, which is a lot. So I think so long as it was very usable, I would probably use it a bit. Thanks very much for your time. Enjoy it, and feel free to comment. Oh, if there's anything I can help you with, obviously I've got a lot of experience in mixing, synthesis, all these sorts of things. Please be in contact. The worst answer I can ever give is no, that's not for me. But if you don't ask, hey, we might have been able to do something cool together. You have a great day.